Welcome back to our channel, Coraljags, where we spent most of the last year visiting ancient sites and exploring the history and folklore that surround them. In this video, we'll be continuing in Gower with the Sweyne House monument on Rhossili Down. At about 6,000 years old, they're an impressive Neolithic pair made of a striking quartz conglomerate. A number of approaching pathways also seem to be made up of varieties of white and pink quartz. And with such a quantity of this beautiful resource in the local geology, it's easy to imagine the Stone Age builders utilising this bright reflective rock to mark avenues around their newly constructed monuments, as has been evidenced elsewhere in the country. Walking to the top of the nearby ridge, you're greeted with stunning views of the iconic Worm's Head. Legends of a dragon, still not dormant, are to be expected in Wales, but on this occasion, it seems it was the Vikings who named the fabled beast, with the Norse word worm meaning dragon or serpent. The Vikings were fond of this area, trading as well as invading their way into the community. Therefore, many local place names can be traced back to them. In this vein, the name Sweyne House has Nordic origins and was introduced here around 1,000 years ago. Sweyne was a common Norse forename, and house could mean hill or barrow, but some local historians have suggested a connection with the infamous Viking Sweyne Forkbeard, who was King of Denmark and, briefly, King of England. This was early in the 11th century, before he was killed by a ghost. Sorry, let me check that. Yeah, okay. Apparently he was killed by a ghost. If you haven't seen our previous couple of videos on the peninsula, please do head over to our channel and check those out, along with a catalogue of over 30 ancient sites around Wales, all of which are completely free to visit and 100% dog friendly, just how we like them. After a long hot day walking the rugged rocky coastline hunting for caves, we set up our tent at a nearby campsite, Pitton Cross.
You happy to be in a tent, Seb? Yeah. Go get Daddy. Go back in the tent.
We chose this site purely because we'd noticed that the nearby hill resembled the hills we call home in the Rhossili Mountains, which you can see across the water in the distance. With the campsite being handily located for walking Rhossili Down and Worm's Head, they had provided a printed map with directions to Sweyne House, which was one of our pre-planned destinations. We haven't got any OS maps for this area yet, nor did we pay for a subscription, so we used the free Ordnance Survey layer on Bing Maps. It's not available on the mobile version, and opening the desktop version on the mobile browser is a bit of a faff in bright sunlight with low signal, so we made these flashcards and saved them as JPEGs on our phones. Ooh, and while we're on the topic, we like to use the handy map on megalithic.co.uk. Their classic map is pretty clunky by today's standards, but if you click on one of the relevant new maps, the user interface is pretty smooth and it features way more ancient sites than a standard OS map, so it's a great free resource. Links to the OS and megalithic maps will be in the description. So, armed with their map as well as our own, we headed off on foot for Rhossili.
Oh, he's got a limp, little limp. So we think we're gonna go up there. Maybe? Do you think? Not through the middle of the horses, maybe.
It's clear that this area has played a significant role in human activities for thousands of years. Not only are there the Sweyne House megaliths, but there are also up to 20 known cairns characteristic of sepulchral structures, including ring cairns of varying sizes. In medieval times, the open common land formed part of an agricultural system, combining arable share lands on the lower ground with open access to the common, used by villagers as grazing land for livestock. There are multiple paths on the top of Rhossili Down that will lead you to Sweyne House. We followed this footpath and made our way across the low open land. There are certainly clearer paths to follow than this one, and likely better drained, so we would probably recommend the one that shows you the beautiful sea view as you walk along the ridge. This site is comprised of the ruins of two monuments, both dating back at least 5,000 years to the Neolithic period. Like a lot of prehistoric monuments, these go by a lot of different descriptions. Ruined dolmens, cairns, chambered tombs and more. But don't worry too much about this terminology, as in recent years the suitability of these titles has been called into question, demonstrating that even now nobody really knows quite what they were built for. And besides this, the meaning of words often changes subtly over time. As a personal example, we like to use the word cromlech to mean a raised capstone supported by two or more standing stones. The literal Welsh translation is something like bent flagstone, and in the 1700s this was defined in English as an altar tomb, becoming synonymous with the word dolmen. But another English definition exists, stating that a cromlech is a large stone circle, a definition which is much more common outside of the UK, where cromlech almost exclusively means stone circle, while dolmen refers to monuments such as this. In the following descriptions, they are mostly referred to as cairns, loosely meaning a mound of stones. This is mostly due to their ruinous state and the difficulty of defining their original form. So let's start with the official description from Covlin. This, the North Cairn, measures 18 metres by 13, with an overall height of 0.6 metres. This is one of a pair of burial chambers 100 metres apart on the gentle east-facing slopes of Rhossili Down. Both are greatly disturbed, with the megalithic remains of the chambers placed eccentrically within oval cairns of the local conglomerate rock. At the western end is a capstone leaning against two supporters, 1.4 metres apart. The slab recumbent between them is known to have stood crosswise in this space, but the full extent of the chamber and the position of the entrance cannot be discerned. Like the northern of this pair of chambers, the site is greatly disturbed, with a chamber located in a cairn of conglomerate boulders. Measuring 20 metres by 14.9, this, the south cairn, is approximately 0.7 metres high. A wedge-shaped structure is suggested by several large boulders, some earth-fast, near the centre of the cairn. The precise location of the chamber is unknown. 5 slabs at the northern end of the cairn, of which only 2 are upstanding, may be the remains of a crescentic court. It has been suggested that the concave edge of one central slab has resulted from the removal of part of it for a millstone. The greatly mutilated condition of both of the chambers on Rhossili Down makes comparison with other megalithic burial structures difficult, but a similarity with the small tombs at Marrows in Carmarthenshire and Garnwen in Pembrokeshire has been noted. There are no records of the Sweyne House site having been excavated, and it's thought that their damaged state would mean any artefacts are likely to be in poor condition. But the fact that there are no records of findings at Sweyne House doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. In 1870, Sir John Gardner Wilkinson, a world-famous English Egyptologist who had a great interest in Gower and its antiquaries, wrote that he found 2 sherds of a cinerary urn, charcoal and calcined bones in a tumulus near the swine's houses. The RCA HM and OS suggest that these came from the cairn very close to these. In 1866, Sir John Gardner Wilkinson moved to Brinfield House at Reynoldston on Gower Peninsula. He had already published several articles on British archaeology and antiquities, and the area around Brinfield provided Wilkinson with ample opportunity to indulge his interest in ancient British remains. The house was close to Cefn Bryn, the site of Arthur's Stone, and Wilkinson was the first to excavate the tomb in 1870, claiming that the pathway, haunted by the ghostly apparition of King Arthur on a white steed, is the remains of a stone avenue. Between 1862 and 1869, he also wrote this about Sweyne House. On Rhossili Down in South Wales are 2 cromlechs, 310 feet apart, each standing at the end of a mass of ruins, which appear to have been once enclosed by a circular wall, now thrown down. They appear also to have had 4 supporters to the cover or capstone, which in the northern one has slipped off, as at Zena or Malfra, and the underside, when standing on the supporting slabs, was about 5 feet 1 inch to 5 feet 5 inches from the ground, on which its lower end now rests. Around them is a circle of fern, probably indicating other remains below it. They are called Swine's houses, probably a corruption of Sweyne's houses, and may have received that name from a battle said to have been fought on these hills with the Danes in 900. Though not built by those passing plunderers, who too are said to have been defeated on that occasion, and to have lost their ships burnt by the Britons. They are also too far from the coast, which is not within sight of them, to mark a spot inhabited by the Danes, or selected by them as a place of interment. They are also of much greater antiquity. Gower was one of the places in Wales that was invaded by the Vikings, and the legacy of these Nordic invaders is still reflected in some of the local place names. Legend says that the monuments are named after the infamous Viking Sweyne Forkbeard. Of course, the monuments predate him by a few thousand years, but that's a pretty common anachronism. According to the legend, Sweyne was a Scandinavian warlord of the 11th century who came to live on the western side of the Gower Peninsula and died there. In England, Scotland and Ireland, the Vikings established settlements and even kingdoms, but there is comparatively little evidence in Wales. The Vikings, seemingly, never took control of Wales or overcame the powers of the Welsh kings, but they are known to have settled in parts of West Wales, such as St David's, Haverfordwest and Gower. As well as these monuments, Swansea is also said to have been founded by Sweyne Forkbeard, after he was shipwrecked in the bay there. The Welsh name for the city, Abertawe, has no such influence, and follows the tradition of referring to the mouth of the river. An excerpt from Swansea History Web says that it is most likely that the first people to realise the potential of the site at the mouth of the Tawe were the Vikings. Between the 9th and 11th centuries, they harried the coast of South Wales as marauders, but they also visited these shores in a more peaceful guise as traders, and established a number of small commercial bases at points on the coast. Few tangible traces of Viking activity in this area remain, but the clearest testimony to the Norse presence is found in the many Scandinavian place names which occur along the coast. The name Swansea is probably derived from two Scandinavian elements: Sweyne, a personal name, and an island or inlet. The island at the mouth of the Tawe has long since disappeared, if indeed there ever was one. Moreover, the precise identity of Sweyne is also uncertain. Sweyne was a fairly common Norse forename, but some local historians have sought to establish a connection with Sweyne Forkbeard, who was King of Denmark and briefly King of England. He had undoubted links with South Wales and was known to have been active in the Bristol Channel in 1002. If, indeed, it is his name which is commemorated in Sweyne A, then the foundation of Swansea must be ascribed to the beginning of the 11th century. However, while no Viking remains have been found at Swansea, it is certain that a Scandinavian maritime trading post was set up there at the close of the Dark Ages, and that this established a commercial tradition which later attracted other invaders to the site. One final comment on the origins of the name is from the House of Names website. The word house or how means or refers to burial mounds or tumuli. The name Howes is of Anglo-Saxon origin and came from when the family lived near a hill or steep ridge of land. The surname Howes is usually derived from the Old English word ho, which means heel or projecting ridge of land. However, it is sometimes derived from the Old Norse word hauger, which means mound or hill or barrow. If you walk to the summit of Rhossili Down, you have amazing views of the surrounding landscape and sea. From here you can see Worm's Head, which marks out the most westerly point on Gower and comprises a rock causeway, linking the small island to the mainland. There is also an Iron Age promontory fort. A challenging walk to the Worm takes planning around local tide times to avoid being cut off, and apparently many people have lost their lives trying to swim back to land. The famous Welsh poet Dylan Thomas initially described the Worm's Head as the very promontory of depression, after he was once forced to spend a night on the head after being trapped by the tide. As we briefly mentioned, the name Worm's Head is thought to come from the Norse word worm, meaning dragon or serpent. It is said that the Vikings named it so because the island resembles a dragon. In stormy weather, a blowhole on the outer tip of the island is known to make loud booming and hissing noises, only furthering the island's association with dragons. This association is present in many old Welsh folk tales. Dragons and winged serpents are said to frequent the lands around Worm's Head, and Mary Trevelyan, in her 1853 book, Folklore and Folk Stories in Wales, often talks of Wales's connection to these mystical creatures. Linked with all the dragon, griffin and winged serpent stories was the belief that in lonely ravines, moorlands and forest, treasures of gold and hoarded gems were guarded by these creatures, who sometimes conveyed their goods through the air at midnight when the old hiding places were discovered. Perhaps there is some hidden treasure on these lands that the winged beasts are protecting.
So the ground's a bit spiky. Little cut gores. And Zeb just kind of stopped and was like, I'm going to stand on this stone until you carry me. You're right, mate. It's actually quite a common thing, really. You'd like it if you did this more often, babe. Good boy. Oh, I'm getting old, mate.